You know that moment in a conversation when everyone just suddenly stops talking? Yeah, that incredibly awkward pause. Or picture this. You're standing outside during a massive storm, waiting for the next crack of lightning, and you're just totally fixated on that suspenseful gap between thunderclaps. It makes you wonder, what exactly is happening inside your brain during those moments of absolute nothingness?
Well, that brings us to the core question of this explainer. Do we actually hear silence? Now, this isn't just some late night shower thought. We are talking about a centuries old philosophical paradox here. Do we genuinely, literally perceive the absence of sound? Or are we just inferring it? Like, are we simply noticing that our ears are empty and our brain cognitively deduces, well, I guess it must be silent right now?
So let's dive right into this academic battlefield. For a really long time, experts have been split into two warring camps. On one side, we've got the cognitive view. They argue that we only judge or infer silence. To them, you literally can't hear nothingness because, well, nothingness isn't a physical thing that can vibrate your eardrum. On the flip side, the perceptual view argues that we literally perceive silence. They say the absence of sound is a successful act of perception all on its own. But here's the kicker. Until very recently, this was a purely theoretical debate. There was absolutely no definitive empirical test to prove it one way or the other. Part 1. The clever illusion trap. Let's see how they caught the brain red-handed. To finally crack this case, a team of researchers from Johns Hopkins University realized they needed to set a trap. You can think of this explainer as a bit of a scientific detective story. But to understand their trap, we first have to look at how our auditory system actually processes the world. It uses a mechanism called event segmentation. Basically, think of continuous acoustic input like an endless stream of Lego bricks pouring in. Your brain takes that continuous messy stream and breaks it down, snapping it into discrete, object-like representations. A musical note, a dog barking, a spoken word. Your brain treats these sounds like physical, tangible blocks. And this right here perfectly illustrates the researchers' genius strategy. We already know for a fact that our brains can be tricked by sound-based illusions, right? Because of how it segments those blocks of sound. These classic illusions can literally warp our perception of time. So the researchers had a massive light bulb moment. If the brain truly treats silence exactly like a real, tangible sound object, then we should be able to substitute silences for sounds in these classic illusions. If periods of silence distort our perception of time just like physical sounds do, boom, we have our proof. But to actually test this, they needed realistic environments. So I want you to play along with me for a second. Imagine you're sitting in a really noisy, bustling restaurant. You're fully immersed in it. Plates are clinking, people are chattering away. Then, out of nowhere, the ambient audio completely cuts out into a dead, absolute silence for just a few seconds before suddenly resuming. This is the exact scenario the researchers subjected their participants to. Part 2. The one silence is more illusion. This was their very first clue. So this builds on a really famous sound illusion where one long, continuous tone naturally feels way longer to a listener than two broken tones, even if they objectively add up to the exact same amount of time. Here is how they adapted it for silence. While fully immersed in that noisy restaurant track, subjects were given two scenarios. In scenario A, the noise cut out for one single continuous gap of silence. In scenario B, the noise cut out twice for shorter gaps, with a tiny brief blip of restaurant noise right in the middle. Crucially, the total duration of the silence in both scenarios was exactly the same. The subjects were then asked a simple question: which block of silence felt longer? The results were absolutely staggering. Exactly 66% of people fell for the trap, judging that single continuous silence as being longer than the two broken silences. And why is that specific number so incredibly important? Because it perfectly mathematically mirrors the results of the original sound-based version of the illusion. There is literally no difference. The brain got tricked by the silence in the exact same way it gets tricked by actual sound. Part 3. Silence-based warping. Let's see how nothingness warps our perception. Let's move on to the second clue and see how this all builds. The researchers really wanted to test if a block of silence could literally warp our perception of distance and time. So they had participants listen to two quick beeps. In one scenario, the beeps were played during an embedded silence. You know, that sudden contained pocket of quiet interrupting our noisy restaurant. But in the second scenario, the beeps were played in a pure, endless silence. Basically just a completely quiet void with absolutely no background noise whatsoever to interrupt. The findings here were totally fascinating. When the tones were played inside that temporary block of embedded silence, people actually perceived them as being further apart in time. But when those same tones were played in the pure, continuous silence, that time-stretching illusion completely vanished. This firmly proves that the brain genuinely treats a temporary gap in noise as a tangible container. It treats it like a physical object that genuinely warps the space inside it. Just wild, right?
Part 4. The oddball silence. What happens when only a part goes quiet?
Okay, so what exactly happens to our perception when only a tiny fraction of our auditory world goes quiet? Imagine being immersed in a completely dual soundscape. You are simultaneously hearing the low, heavy rumble of a train engine on one side and the high, sustained note of a musical organ on the other. Both of these are playing continuously, right at the same time.
To test this, the researchers established a rhythm of partial silences, essentially to lull the brain into a predictable pattern. They dropped out the train engine 4 times in a row for a set duration. So you hear a dip, a dip, a dip, a dip. But then, on the 5th silence, they sprang the oddball trap. Instead of the train dropping out again, they suddenly dropped out the organ. And the results were, frankly, mind-bending. The unexpected oddball silence actually felt significantly longer to the listeners than the standard silence did, even though they were objectively the exact same length. This is completely revolutionary because it proves that different partial silences literally sound different to our brains. We aren't just noticing a general absence, we actively characterize the silence based on exactly what is missing from it.
Part 5. We truly perceive silence. Time to synthesize all these clues.
So let's map all of this out. In the one is more illusion, one silence feels longer. In the warping illusion, silence is stretch time. And in the oddball illusion, a novel silence feels longer. In every single one of these scenarios, the cognitive view, that old idea that we are merely inferring silence, completely falls apart. Why? Because you can't have an auditory illusion based purely on an inference. The brain is very clearly treating the nothingness of silence exactly as it treats physical vibrating sound.
Which leads us directly to this incredible quote from the study. Empty periods of time can also be segmented to produce representations of silence. Guys, this is a groundbreaking paradigm shift for how we understand the auditory system. Our brains aren't just passively sitting there turning off when the noise stops, they are actively generating event files out of pure nothingness. We are quite literally constructing silence in our minds. This fundamentally changes how we might study auditory processing disorders or even how we design sonic environments in the future, all because nothing is actively processed as something.
But as always, this leaves us with one final, deeply provocative question. Is it physiologically possible for humans to ever perceive absolute, true silence? I mean, given the constant omnipresence of our own internal bodily noises, the rush of blood in our ears, the sound of our own breathing, can we ever experience a true, absolute void? Or are we just always trapped in a soundscape of our own making? It definitely makes you question your own reality, doesn't it? Well, thanks so much for exploring this explainer with me today, and keep questioning what you hear or, what you don't hear.